Good morning, everybody. This is Mark Dempsey at the National Convergence Technology Center here at Collin College in Texas. I'm showing top of the hour. Let's go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining us this morning for our webinar on competency-based education, design, delivery. Happy Friday the 13th to everybody. Just a few quick rules here before we get into the content part. I am here on the chat box, so if you have any questions or comments, please send those to me because everyone's going to be muted. Just to keep things sort of organized and smoothly running, you all are muted, but send me questions and comments to the chat box, and I will get those broadcast into the meeting, okay? We definitely try to do these webinars twice a year, once in the fall, once in the spring, so I'm glad you could join us. Also, please, CCN, write your name and school in the chat box so you get credit for being here. I'm seeing most of your names, and I am trying to keep roll, but please also, just as a redundant effort, send me your name and school in the chat box window, okay? Also, the chat box may not be open by default, so you may have to sort of hunt around to open the chat box because sometimes it's not obvious where it is, okay? All right. So we have this morning with us Mike Labasi from Sinclair Community College and Doug Miller from Solid Community College. They have experience with CBE, and we're very happy they're here to talk to us today. They're both, those schools are both in CCN, of course. Okay, so Mike Labasi, I'm going to give you the presentation ball so you can share your screen.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
You sound good, and I see your screen.
Okay. Well, again, good morning, everybody, and thanks for attending. Quick introduction, I am, Professor Mike Labasi with Sinclair Community College. I am also part of this committee with Kyle Jones. He's out. He had a kid, so if you want to send him congratulations, he had a healthy baby boy. So he's out on a maternity leave. And he gives everybody well wishes from himself here. So discover e-learning and our CBE courses we offer. And a big part of what we do at Sinclair, of course, with CBEs is use our e-learning division. And they support a lot of different online degrees. This is 2017 numbers. I wouldn't be surprised if it's much more than this, but 326 plus online courses, 36 degree programs, and 11 CBE programs. And they're a big part of helping us design and support our CBE content. Of course, they have a model they use, and they really leverage our e-learn system, our LMS. And what we do is they look at the employer needs, and they bring in a program development and create master course shells. And they'll work up from us, too, as the faculty and administrative coaches. And we will also give input to those shells. So it's a very tightly controlled master shell system. So a big part what they do also is, besides just the online e-learn development, master shell development, and administration, and working with us for continuous improvement, is also coaching. So as CBE students come into the course, they are assigned a faculty coach partnership. And they actually have a CBE coordinator be part of the shell so they can actually see the progress of the student. And they will also ping us once or twice during the CBE enrollment period, just for a progress report and updates. It's actually very valuable if we see a CBE student falling off, getting way far behind, or not meeting the assessments. We can work with them to help mitigate any issues. So they also offer training. Besides the major revisions of the courses per year, they work with ensure we have web accessibility guidelines. Also work under internal reviews of our courses. So they also develop online training for us, and we actually have to go through an online training course. Hope you can see right here. Our e-learn division itself will push out a course to us over our actual shell, and we'll have to walk through a few-week course, understand how it works, design, and delivery. So you can see here, like most of you probably have, a really good eLearn division. They have technology support, student support also, which is nice. We need a place for the students to go out and ask technical questions. It could be issues with their web browser. It could be issues with the shell itself. So this gives them someone to leverage on besides us as the professors. Or actually, we would just take them anyways. So the actual course model we use a learning object repository. This is what's heavily assessed and reviewed, and those are pushed out to shells. These shells are used to match our modalities. So currently we do offer your standard modalities of classroom, in-person, online, and CBE. We also push out, let's go to the next slide. We also push out hybrid courses too, mixed courses with face-to-face and proctored courses. So we offer this hybrid modality, which gives them some unique courses and some unique abilities that would often be hard to do with online or face-to-face. So CBE being the primary thing we're here to talk about, we look heavily at what needs to be assessed and what defines mastery for the student to complete. And we actually set a mastery threshold, which we actually put into, and I'll show you my master shell here. We put that into our shell design itself. So if we look at the content of the shell, we can see, besides the CBE eLearn division giving us a great preparing your shell guideline, which is really nice. They also, we set up these checkpoints. For example, there's a course overview survey. After this is completed, the actual topics will release. And we can see here, we do have an assessment here. You cannot move on. You cannot take Chapter 2, for example, for malware and social engineering attacks until Chapter 1 with 80% or better is completed. So these checkpoints help us to ensure that mastery is being met as they move through the CBE process. So we do use a unit or topic-based structure. For BIS or CIS, we use a topical base. This allows us some flexibility in mix and matching topics with our course. Other ones like the BIS courses use more into unit-based to meet certain objectives. So it's slightly different layouts that are tuned for the different academic divisions. Thing too is we also offer pre-assessment and post-assessments. A big part is when the student comes into CBE, we make sure they meet certain requirements at the pre-assessment. This was a huge deal before because it wasn't in place originally, and we'd have students coming in without the proper background, and try to tackle a CBE course on their own, end up dropping the courses. So we had a higher drop rate, and we went with the pre-assessment. It allows us to have a checkpoint along with the coaches to ensure that they can at least meet the course requirements and hopefully to completion. So I ran a few CBE courses, and I've had good luck with all my students in them. So I think the pre-assessment really does help. Along with that too is, of course, the support from eLearn. They have drop-in programs for us. We do have one-on-one meetings. I did do that. Even as an adjunct, I actually had one-on-one meetings with the coaches to go over the process. And they also, of course, we have self-paced teaching courses. Again, these have to be completed before you can teach a CBE course. And again, our eLearn division, definitely, we reach out to them for development updates and further training and support. So I will leave it open for any questions.
If anyone has any questions, send them to me in the chat box. Go ahead. Nothing right now, Mike.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Feel free to reach out to me with any further questions or tips or tricks to either Kyle or myself. And thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mike, for that. So let me switch it back now to Doug. So he can do his talk.
Okay, everybody hear me all right now?
Yeah, you sound good.
Okay, I don't see the share come up yet.
You should see it.
Yeah.
Let me try again.
Okay, no sweat.
Hold on, now I'm going to give it back to you. Oops. Nope. There we go.
Okay, it says I'm now the presenter.
There you go.
And everything's there. Do you see my screen okay?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
No.
Okay, so what is causing me issues today?
So at the top, there should be like a little pull-down menu that says Share Screen. No?
Yeah, I'm looking there. Okay.
There you go. It's happening.
There. All right. Let's get rid of some of this other stuff. Okay, everybody still hears me all right? So we're going to go ahead.
Sound good?
We're going to go ahead and press on. I always put this disclaimer up right off the bat because one of the problems that we do have with CBE is almost everybody's agreed on certain modalities and ways of teaching and some terminology, but there's nothing written down in stone and brought down by the mountaintop from Muhammad or Moses or whichever faith you believe in. So it's just, these are experiences we've had. So, as we go through these things, take that in consideration. All right, so again, I just go by a simple definition from CBEN, which is a consortium of different colleges with Sinclair and Salt Lake Community College are part of. And it boils down to very simply, competency-based education combines an internal, transparent approach to curriculum design. You guys can read. Some of the big keys on this is that students actually have to demonstrate their knowledge and skills. We'll see that when I get into a little bit later when we define competencies, that type of thing. Students should have, obviously, and it doesn't matter what modality you teach in, guidance and support from faculty and staff. This other line about assessments is probably one of the biggest ones that we didn't have problems with, but it was trying to define, and that's assessments that are robust, meaningful, and authentic. And we'll get into that a little bit later as we go into what the assessments do. And obviously for, getting their credentials, their credits, that sort of thing for mastering content. So one of the big problems that we had initially was competency-based education and our accreditors. We're in the Northwest region, so we actually had to come down and they developed this framework for us that they'll consider programs for competency-based when all of the courses. So we have finally rolled all of our courses in our particular school that way. And now we're actually looking at a college-wide rollout in certain areas. The next big one is biotech and general education, actually. So what is competency-based education? This is actually a video from CBEN. If it runs, it runs. If it doesn't, I'm going to go ahead and pass on. So, yeah. So everybody hear that okay?
No, there's no audio that I'm hearing. Is anyone else
hearing
again?
Okay?
I'm not hearing the audio. Maybe someone else is, though.
No, I can hear the audio fine. You dropped out for a bit and then you came back.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and press. If half can't hear it, it's not that big a deal on the video. It's one of those constant videos that everybody sees about how what CBEN does, that type of thing. Let me get into. That'll work. Thank you, Mark. Mark's going to send out the link for everybody. So let's get into what we do actually at our school and how we do it. We were actually defined by our legislating body in the state of Utah, the legislators, that our mission is, like it says, low cost, short-term, open entry. What that means is really simply is it's not just open entry and just come in whenever you feel like it, but basically once you meet the requirements for whatever program you want to get into, you can pretty much start on the next Monday. So we go pretty much year round. We do take time off for breaks, that type of thing. But you know, that was our legislative. Somebody just threw something up on the thing. Sorry about that. So that was our problem, our mandate from the legislator: low cost, short term, and all that. We do have a tremendous amount of, according to the federal guidelines, that are economically or educationally disadvantaged students that are trying to get skills to get into the workforce, and we do have a tremendous amount of them. And you know, the curriculum for CTE, that's just, you know, career technical education type things. So the biggest things we had is we had to actually come together as both faculty and administrative. And we know sometimes that's, you know, I guess our dean said it the best. He goes, sometimes it's like herding cats. Okay, so why did we move to CBE? What were some of the goals we were looking at? Somebody's speaker's on in there dragging something. Okay. First off, we wanted to improve students' access, retention, and completions. There's a couple factors that come into play. We know that students like online classes. So they don't have to move into, you know, go to school every day, that type of thing. They can work on it when they feel like it, that type of thing. But we also understand that a pure online environment, students drop off the face of the earth, like Mark was talking about earlier, and we can intercede. We'll talk a little bit as we go on later about how we do that type of thing. We had to meet, like Mark had said on this thing, some of this is replete, quality standard. We have a modified version of Quality Matters that we use. Improve faculty and student engagement. Now, this may sound weird, but one of the factors we saw when we moved to CBE, we went away from what I call the sage on the stage, where I'm setting up and lecturing and talking to however many students at any one time, to almost an individual role of mentoring individual students as they had questions. And we did come up with some incentives for students to accelerate their learning if they chose to. We'll talk about those. So one of the issues we had, and I don't know if anybody's ever experienced these before, we were under a clock hour model, and we don't know who did it when they put in the federal paperwork for financial aid, but the problem with the clock hour program is, and this is a financial aid matter, students do not get credit unless they spend every moment in the classroom that they choose. So if you say your program is 90 hours long, the students have to spend 90 hours long in the course, in the classroom, in their seat, or else they don't get credit, which means they don't get paid. And whoever came up with that model, I don't know, but that's, you know, so we, you know, came out to, you know, we expanded our hours of operation, and with CBE, we did away with the clock hour seat time model. They could come whenever they want. Our hours of operation for our school is basically 8 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. Now, we have multiple instructors that come in at different times and all that, but, I mean, it runs without a break. Because the students are going to be at different models all over the place, or different places all over. Again, like I said, penalized for accelerated progress. If a student finished early, if they were financial aid, they had to sit there if they wanted to get paid. If they wanted their next disbursement and all that, and not have to pay money at the end, they would have to sit there for hours. Yeah, I had a student one time went through and completed everything in half the time that was needed. And he wound up spending about 3 weeks just sitting there. You know, he was doing some cert study, things like that, but technically he was done. When he could have moved on with the CBE model. Again, like Mark had said, you have to master competency, that type of thing. The other thing is students pay for each course in the clock hour model. We're aware of that. You know, everybody has that. Even if it's a credit, you know, you pay X number of dollars for credit hours and all that. We changed that model. We went to what we call a block model. What that means for us is that you're charged for a 10-week block of time. And everything you can complete, all courses and all that, in that 10-week block of time is yours. You get credit for them, you move on. So it's not just, okay, there's 3 classes in this block. If you could complete 6, you could complete 6. If if you were a little bit slower and you couldn't complete everything, well, that's no problem because you could always buy another block of time. So, we've actually found a lot of students like that because especially some students that have experience in the field, they're going through this stuff at a phenomenal rate because they don't have to wait for me to get to the next section or open up the next section for labs, that type of thing. So, faculty, one of the issues that we did have is faculty load discrepancies. Most places, depending. Sorry, go ahead. Okay. One of the problems that we had is that, we all understand faculty. Usually we're defined by how many hours we teach, credit hours, anywhere from 15 to 20 depending on college and, those type rules. The problem with going to this open model where people could be in the classroom, we had to kind of translate that credit hour back into more of how many hours a week does the instructor have to be in the classroom. Our average right now is 18 hours overall. Some people are at 15, some are at 20. Just depends on your program and what the factors are individually. For most of the CS guys, we're all at 18. So we spend 18 hours a week in the classroom various times, and then we have the rest of the time for whatever coursework, redevelopment, changing, college work, those type of things. The other problem we had was inconsistent curriculum development and delivery. Not so much the development side because we did have some support from our e-learning side, but it was the delivery that was the issue. And one of the things we talk about a lot of times is that when you're grading students out, especially and working on things, a student that gets in a more traditional model, if they get a 70 and then 100 on 2 exams, then the average is 85 or whatever. Well, that doesn't work in competency-based. In competency-based, the student has to meet the standard for every particular competency that you're looking at. So again, we're looking for difference, and some of this is exactly like Mark had. Obviously, we all know if we don't have our industry and partners looking at what we do, that type of thing, we don't know exactly what is happening. Identifying right competencies. I'll show you guys a competency here on the next slide. And what we're doing is we're just lining things up. Your competencies are your high-arching things. I kind of look at it that I tell to when I do a overall for everybody is a competency is like bake a cake. And your objectives are everything that you do to support that competency. So it'd be like measure flour, put frosting on, that type of thing. Those are all your objectives. Also, you have to align assessments to the competencies. One of the problems that we had is that people would say, bake a cake. Well, if you look at it, bake is kind of an action word. We have to do something. So you couldn't have a total multiple choice or true-false test to actually assess that competency. So the assessment would be for a student to bake a cake. Then we would have to identify instructional activities like, setting up the stoves, those type of things. So, that kind of gets to be a thing because it changes how people think and how they've taught before. Again, like I said, the overall arching skill, the ability to, learner already has, that type relevant. And this is the big thing, relevant to real-world job, task, or responsibilities. Sometimes we do talk in, I'm trying to think of the exact term on that, but we talk about things, well, in a perfect world, but we all know the world's not perfect a lot of times. So we have to be careful in how we do these things. Learning objectives, measurable, discrete goals, I'll show you that in a moment. the competency, like I said, unpacked into objectives. And then finally, again, it comes back to assessment. Real world, valid, reliable, aligned, that type of thing. And the exams, performance based, the projects, whatever you want, but it needs to match the competency. So if you look here on this side, this is how we've kind of done it, okay? And this is just a real simple, but if you look at C1 up on top, that is my competency. This actually, I pulled this off an A+ course that we had just, because it was the first thing I came to because of the letter A. Identify the basic elements and functions of computer hardware and operating systems. You notice how not vague it is, but it's kind of a high level overall reaching. Now, I didn't have just, if you looked below that, the learning objectives, we match them like C1 always told me what the competency was. And then I went on, okay, what is the actual objective? As you see, compare, contrast the features and requirements for various Microsoft operating systems. The assessment on that was actually a written test. We use Canvas as our LMS, so that's why you see Canvas Chapter 1 exam. And you notice on that we said 80%. Now, the second objective, this is what's different, okay? We actually put on there that we wanted the assessment. It's an identification assignment, and everything had to be absolutely correct. And that was where students had to point out, what some of them did is they would take pictures and label the item, whatever the port was, that type of thing. And we also said they have to pass that exam again. But you notice there's a difference. We said on the identification assignment that it was 100% compared to the exam that was 80. And in our school, the instructors were allowed to choose what they chose for the assessment and the standard for the assessments. So in this case, what would happen with CBE, let's say a student passed the Canvas exam, but did not pass the port assignment with 100% accuracy. They haven't completed the competency until that port assignment was, is gotten assessed to the 100% level. And there's obviously another part, connect computer components, and that was, we actually used some lab sim stuff for that, and that's code for wherever that lab sim is. So you can see how that. Is there any questions on how we set that up yet? And we're going.
Yeah, no questions yet.
Okay. Hopefully I didn't put them to sleep yet. That's why there's nothing. So some things that we came up with, and Mark kind of touched on this a little bit when he was talking about progress to intercede, to help a student get through and, so they don't fall off the face of the earth. One of the big questions that we had was, what is progress? And we had people all over the place that come up with all sorts of things. And, we had people like, well, if they're attending, they're making progress. Well, I kind of got a little upset at that because I don't know how many times I've seen students just sitting at a computer screen watching some YouTube video on, how to change the tires on their car or whatever it was. So we actually broke down all of our objectives to time. And so what would happen is that if a student spends, let's say, 3 hours in a class working on an assignment, and we have defined that this assignment is worth 6 hours, and if they completed it in 3 hours, their progress was actually at 200% at that point for that, just for that assignment. Now, when you put everything together, you get an overall progress. So you could actually be faster, and we'd be able to tell by looking at the progress. And we used a tool called North Star. It's actually was designed originally in the state of Utah by their developers for what they call their technical college programs. So we started using it because it would track all these little individual assignments and give us a progress based upon a quasi-schedule that we submitted, which was basically saying just students will work at an estimated rate of 16 hours a week versus how many of these assignments they completed. So it would add all that up, do the math, and we would have our progress. The other obvious part is the no averaging of test scores. Like I said, you couldn't average, 2 exams and say, well, it's at 85% because one's high, the other's low. Student progress tracking. This actually works into both sides. Like we said, one of the problems sometimes is students fall off the face of the earth. And we're looking at this going, well, how do we stop them just falling off the face of the earth? Two things happen with that. One is that when we redesigned our courses for the CBE modality, we tried to make it where there was a hands-on lab that probably had to be completed in the classroom once a week. Now, that didn't always hold true because of the nature of some courses and all that. And the reason we tried to do that is we wanted to have meaningful contact with the student weekly. And what that meaningful contact was just very simple. Was like, hey, I noticed you're doing fine. You're right on track to finish on time. Everything's doing great. I just say keep it up. Or the other problem I have is, we've had students that kind of fall off. They're not making progress. And hey, what's going on? It could be anything as simple as, well, I couldn't get a couple labs done because my car broke down, or it's just, I've been overwhelmed. There's a gamut of excuses. We've all heard these before, but they're valid. So we're trying, with this meaningful contact, we're trying to break this link where they just fall off the face of the earth.
Hey, Doug, we did get one question, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
How do students learn troubleshooting skills in a virtual environment?
Well, they don't always have to do it. Like I said, we have hands-on requirements for labs. So let's go back to that A+ course I had, okay? And then the one of them said on there that the one objective was to, install cards and all that. Well, we could require that the student complete that lab in the classroom, which we're open at any time. The student comes in, says, I want to do lab X. The instructor, lab aide, whatever, would set up one of the systems that we have with whatever failures that they decide to put in, and the student would just work at it. So remember, the thing is, we're not always just, and this is the part of the thing with CBE. People think CBE equals online. No, all CBE says is that you have to meet certain standards. So what we've done is take it to a more hybrid type program where, yeah, there's some online learning, that type of thing, but we also have that on classroom or in classroom. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's good. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to try this other movie. Now, remember what I said is that not, and we all know not every student is our A student and all that. I actually chose a student on purpose because we were having some problems with the student on making progress. Now, obviously, she's allowed us, we've used this video at other conferences. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try it. If you can't hear it, Mark, I imagine you'll forward the link again to him on that, okay?
Yes.
Okay, well, that worked really well. We'll have to forward the link to you. I'm one of these guys, I don't go backwards and spend forever trying to fix something on a thing like this. But basically, the student, her name is Cammie, and she fell behind. So she talks about a few things like we put her on a contract. And what we say with the contract is this more than anything else. It's like, hey, guys, how many hours? Okay. How many hours a week are you going to spend in the classroom so we can help you out a little bit more to get your progress back up and all that? And how she turned around finally after a while. So overview on that. So just this last year in my program alone, okay, I've had over 150 students, okay? Most of them are finishing at or above average time. Obviously, the advantage to the student is that what they finish early, they don't have to pay extra tuition for. We don't have any hard data yet on retention because we just don't want, like a one-year thing and it's an aberration or whatever, that type of thing. So we're looking at, we're collecting data, but we just haven't thrown the data together. to say, yes, we can see over a time frame that we are improving or whatever. Diverse audience for us. We have a, here we have a split about 50-50 between the minority and non-minority things. We have a tremendous amount of Hispanics that are attending our CBE model. The one issue, and this, again, this is kind of maybe an aberration, and we're not totally 100% positive on this. We think one reason why we have a large Hispanic is that they work with us a lot of times one-on-one because they may not quite understand a particular word or a phrase or something like that that we're saying. And instead of them being embarrassed and saying something out in front of everybody, say, hey, can you re-explain because I'm not sure I understand, they stay quiet. Well, here they talk to us one-on-one and they could get that. So I think, sometimes word of mouth, I think, gets out, and this is what's happening with us. So I'm going to, any questions?
I got one question, Doug, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
So for the instructor hour requirement, other than the in-house labs, do the instructor availability or so-called office hours count toward that requirement?
Not the in-classroom time. The rule we have is basically instructors have to have at least 5 hours a week of office hours. So a student can go to an office, talk to them privately or whatever. But remember at the same time that that 15 to 20 hours a week, depending on what program you're in, time in the classroom, a lot of students are talking to us at that time on things they would have talked to us in the office before. I think office hours came about because when we were doing the lecture system where we were sage on the stage, and I remember one of my professors saying, this is a lecture, this is not an answer period. If you want answers, come see me afterwards in my office and my hours are published. Well, when we changed that where we're now almost mentoring instead of lecturing, the students can ask those questions right then and there. I always tell the story this about myself alone. I'm not a traditional teacher or a professor or anything like that because I actually spent 20 years in the Air Force first, working in electronics on aircraft, that type of thing. And the aircraft I worked on were just big computer platforms. And that's how I started with all my computer stuff. And when I first got out of college and was going to finish my degree, I went to a college, which will remain nameless, and I asked the professor, I went, hey, I've got 20 years experience, a few years teaching, and all of a sudden, I've got to take this course. And the professor went, okay, you're graded on the midterm and the final, and you'll be in class and everything else. And I'm like, why? And he goes, that's the way I've done things for the last 20 years, and that's the way it'll be. Well, I decided to just show up for the midterm and the final and wound up walking out with a 95 average for the school for that course. So that's one reason why I'm a big proponent of CBE like that. So
You're an asshole.
I have one more question, two more questions. For one, how many different courses does each instructor cover? And then also, do you offer traditional delivery alongside the CBE delivery format? If so, we would be comparing success of the two modalities.
Actually, our success is about the same. Yes, we do. We have the CBE side, and then we have the regular, 3 credit hour type side and all that. What we find, the funny thing is, this, again, anecdotal. I mean, we could pull the numbers and see it, but for what we see, that regular credit hour type side, the 3 credit hours, meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8 to 9:30, whatever it is. Those are usually the younger students. Those are the students just coming out of high school, in their early 20s, that type of thing. The CBE students, on the average, are adults, and I'm saying, the students that are older, mid-30s and up, that type of thing, because they just want to get in, they want to get done, they want to get out to the world. So, yeah, we do offer both side by side.
So how many courses does one instructor cover?
Oh, sorry, yeah, I forgot about that part. what we actually do is we kind of break them into areas more than courses, because the courses in CBE are almost irrelevant to the point. It's more the competency itself of what you're trying to teach. But we do understand people have different levels of understanding, even professors, for different topics. My big thing that I teach a tremendous amount of the Cisco stuff, actually a lot of the network infrastructure like wireless sides, those type of things. Now, Stephen Fogg is one of my other instructors. He's a Microsoft Server guru. Now, I could answer a lot of questions for like Microsoft Server side, but Stephen does a better job, and vice versa. So we're both there around the same times. And if a student has a question that Stephen's not 100% sure on because it's about routing or something like that, he's been known to come to my office, say, "You got a minute to talk to somebody?" "Sure, no problem," and vice versa. So I hope that answers your question.
So there's one more here. This person says he is one who believes that CBE equals online. So for a classroom environment, are the students really progressing on an individual basis? How do you manage that?
Well, it's kind of hard initially because you got to wrap your head around it. And one of the problems is that, traditionally we've been taught that everybody progresses at the same rate because I'm the owner, as the professor, I'm the owner of the material, and I give it out a little bit at a time. Well, we had to change that question. It's like we had to put all the material out there right off the bat. So again, this system that we have called North Star that I was telling you about, it tracks progress for us, and through our LMS, students will submit assignments to us through the LMS, and they get written over to the North Star program for me automatically. When I turn on North Star, I see a dashboard that tells me, and I have benchmarks put in there. It says, let me know everybody that's at 90% progress or below. And it'll tell me right off the bat, it's going, okay, these are where everybody's at right now. So that's one of the tools that we use that way. Like I said, in a pure competency-based environment, courses are irrelevant again. It's what you're looking at is the material to support the competency, not the course. So, it just changed. It takes a little bit of a thought process change, but it's actually really easy. We've got 30 some odd instructors right now across a few programs that are doing this, and yeah, they said initially they had problems with it because it was just changing the paradigm.
Here's another question. Isn't it challenging to have the labs open 8 a.m. to 9 p.m.? How do you cover all those times, given that you're only there 15 hours a week?
Well, like I said, you got multiple instructors that are there 15 hours a week. So it's just a scheduling thing.
Okay.
And it's like, like Stephen, he covers a lot of times 8 in the morning till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I cover a lot of times 1 in the morning till 6 at night. Then we have some adjuncts that come in. It's just, a couple lab aides spread across, that type of thing. So it's just a matter of scheduling.
Do the students get notified times of who's going to be where and when?
Oh, yeah, and ours are pretty standard. And after usually the first day, the student knows that Stephen's here usually in the morning, Doug's afternoon, Nathan or Gary could be at night, that type of thing. Plus they know our lab aides across the board. And our lab aides are not just responsible for just setting up a PC. Our lab aides are actually a lot of times students that have gone through our programs already, and we hire them on just for a little bit. We don't let them stay forever. We want them to get out to the job market, but they'll work with us for a semester or whatever. And a lot of times they answer the questions too, just depending on what it is.
All right, thanks. I think that's it for now, question-wise.
Anybody else? I'm going to, go ahead and mute me out if you want there.
Do you use any collaboration tools like Onenote or Slack?
Actually, we have a couple collaboration tools that are even built into our LMS. One of the issues that we do have sometimes with the CBE, and I know where the question's kind of going, is that how do students work together for certain projects? Well, we don't have that many group projects per se, but we do have a couple, and that kind of gets to be a challenge on occasions because you're trying to get people that are there at the same time to work together. The other factor is, though, that students will gravitate to each other in groups of where they're at anyway, because they kind of, it's like, so, they're not just everybody's helter-skelter, I mean, all around the place. They kind of, it's like, oh, this guy's working on this Cisco part, and I am too. So they kind of, it's like a gravity thing. They all keep moving towards each other. So we'll see clusters of students doing, in the same areas. And that's not by us saying, no, you have to sit there or anything. That's just them doing it.
Any other questions or comments from anyone? Let's see, there's one more here. If the students' notes are in the LMS, how do they access them after the class ends?
Well, first of all, our students don't get they don't drop access to the LMS the minute the class ends. Our people leave the class open for them in that LMS for 2 years.
So, Michael Abbasi, are you still there? Is there anything you wanted to add along the way here that you've been listening to Doug's talk?
I was just going to say I concur with a lot of what Doug was saying about progress, and also the students that we see in CBE. They are mostly professionals or older students that are want to work at that faster pace to complete the objectives. And then, of course, I've seen in my day courses the younger students just out of high school. So we see some similarities there. We do some similar stuff. We do close our shells though after the completion of the course. So I never ever heard any issues with notes. I assume my students can keep a copy of their notes. And we do have proctored in our testing center for proctored exams. Most of the courses, at least I teach, we use NetLabs. So there's hands-on over the virtual environment. And the last thing is when you do sign up to teach a CBE, you sort of acknowledge you'll answer emails within a certain time period. So they do know about your posted office hours, but you can also, you have a requirement to meet certain standards of communicating back with questions. So a lot of similarities with Mr. Miller.
Here's another question. Do you use industry standard certification tests to measure competency?
It depends on the test. And the reason why I say that is like the perfect example people have for a little while. If everybody remembers for a while with Windows 7, what we call the Microsoft 680 exam, that was the desktop one, the failure rate on that exam right off the bat for a first attempt was like 85% for a long time. So, Microsoft did make some changes eventually to the exam, which brought the pass rate up. But the problem is, if you've given the student all the information, if they've been able to pass certain tests, and especially the hands-on environment, do you fail them because of a Microsoft exam? And this is just a personal thing. I have a problem sometimes with Microsoft exams because if everybody remembers back to school with Rodney Dangerfield, when the one teacher had the question in like 27 parts or whatever, that's kind of my attitude sometimes on certain Microsoft exams. And like I said, the Windows 7 was kind of similar to that. So no, we don't. We have our own exams that we have created along with our hands-on, and we do have hands-on finals for all of our courses too. So it's both a written and a hands-on type thing.
Any other questions for Doug and for Mike before we end? Some people said the chat window closed. It may have closed on your side, so maybe it's a way to reopen it. I also have email open, so if you want to email me a question, that's working for Doug Spindler. So if you want to email me something real quick here, if your chat box isn't working,
Yeah.
You can try that too.
And if somebody, you know, Mark, if you throw up my address, that's fine because, you know, email or phone,
Okay, I'll send that
phone
out.
number too.
Definitely.
That's fine.
Mike, you okay with that too?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that sounds good.
Right. Okay. The block hours, who approves those?
What do you mean block hours? You talking about our block of time?
Let's see if he responds to that.
Okay. Well, what
Yes,
it is
that's what we
okay.
need, yeah.
So what it is on the block hours, that approval actually had to go to the president because of our school, because it did change the credit, you know, because the credit model, you know, you're buying, you know, however much money for X number of credits and all that. So what we did is that we basically just said, okay, you've got 10 weeks. And she agreed to that, saying, well, that makes sense. And so we just came up with a tuition. You know, they did some math. They came up with a tuition. I'm not exactly positive because the tuition varies a little bit depending on any lab fees, that type of thing. But that actually went to the president for approval. But, you know, so that's how we came up with a 10-week block time frame.
I also got a comment. The Microsoft exams have been revamped and are now correlated to specific classes. Employers don't seem to care about them at all anymore.
Well, it depends. I just came out of a program advisory committee meeting where 3 of our program guys for companies here said what they like about the Microsoft certification exams is that there's certain employees, depending on what level they are, they do like it. They also use the exam, certification exam, as like a tiebreaker in some cases, maybe for hiring. I almost concur with the person that said it, though, about, yeah, we're not seeing the same level that we had back in like the 90s, early 2000 time frame.
All right, well, there's no other questions. Thank you, Doug, and thank you, Mike, for sharing your expertise. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, taking the time to learn more about. I will send you the recording link. I will send you a survey, a short survey to fill out to evaluate this hour, the video links, and their email addresses, okay? So be looking for that soon, all right, everyone?
Appreciate everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And have a good weekend, everybody, okay?
All right, bye.
Bye.